Good afternoon. This is CIVE638, Sedimentation Engineering, and I'm Professor Victor Ponce. And the subject today is more on geomorphology, or fluvial geomorphology. Now, I already opened Goodbye, Louisiana.
The entire complex was completed in 1963 and seemed a great success. But 10 years later, in 1973, a massive flood almost destroyed the ORCS. Professor Raphael Kazman, a civil engineer, visited the low sill at the height of the 73 flood. He reminisces.
We had a major flood, and I thought one afternoon that I'd go out and take a look and watch the water go through the structure. And I got out to the structure, and I walked down the structure. I was going to look down and see where the water was, and the whole thing was vibrating like a train station when a 50-car loaded freight goes through at 60 miles an hour. It was just vibrating tremendously, and I thought that this was no place for me to be, and I left. And 2 days later, the wing wall, which is now replaced by rocks, was undermined and fell in. They didn't find a trace of it.
In these shots, you can see the collapse of that wing wall, the one in the foreground. Before its collapse, pressure began to build up on the backside of the wall. Finally, the wing wall was undermined and collapsed. If the bank adjacent to the structure had failed, the water would be totally out of control and would go past the low sill rather than through it.
I'm sitting here just downstream from the old river control structure in back of me, and this pile of rocks wasn't here originally. Originally, this channel was a straight shot carved out in the sand and gravel. But there's a big hole, an underground, submerged hole about 200 feet deep, produced by a whirlpool, a kind of a whirlpool, and it is slowly allowed or forced the sides to cave in a kind of a scallop fashion.
I know what Raphael is talking here. The whirlpools produced, or the holes produced by whirlpools. And I'd like to share with you an experience that I had. When I was in Pakistan in 1976, carrying out the field work on my PhD dissertation, we were manning a boat. We were on a boat doing some eco-sounding on the bed of the river. We want to get the morphology of the river recorded. And we went over this old bridge, which must have been there 100 years. And right below, downstream of the old bridge, all of a sudden the eco sounder went nuts. It went crazy. The usual depth, the depth of that river was about 10 feet, and it showed about something on the order of 50 feet. There was a hole in there. How come the bridge has not been destroyed by the hole? Because the hole was right there below the bridge. And the answer was because that's rock. That was founded on rock. That's why. Had it been founded on soil, the bridge obviously would be gone. One experience.
So they put these rocks in here to keep it from caving so fast. In 1973, a scour hole formed upstream of the structure and almost undermined the structure. If those two scour holes had made contact, there would have been an underground passage under the control structure. There would be no more control.
But its problems don't end there. The very water that sustains it is now suffocating it as well, because it carries an overload of silt. The amount of silt in the river has more than doubled over the past 50 years. The waters of the muddy Mississippi that now rush into the Atchafalaya contribute their share. Natural gas and petroleum exploration has meant the dredging out of new channels, and the Atchafalaya itself is still a growing river.
I think one of you chose the theme that I put in there among the topics to be selected. Can we solve the sediment problem? So that's interesting. I thought that occurred to me that we can do that based on this movie and others. The answer to that is no, we can't. We have to just live with it. We can apply technologies and techniques that we learned in this class in order to live with the sediment. But to solve the sediment problem completely, I don't think we can. And this movie is showing us that that is the case.
Hi, Professor.
This is the removal of the logjam.
What? Ari?
It's Ari.
Okay.
Yeah, I came in. I didn't want to
okay.
interrupt you.
That's okay. No problem. We're here to help.
It has been churning out the deeper riverbed. sediment from the river used to settle out over thousands of miles of swamplands. But now the levee system holds it in until it reaches the small area of swamp that's left. There, the mud begins to drop off as water spreads out to replenish the swamp. Little islands appear quickly, and willows grow on them almost overnight, proclaiming the permanence of this new land.
The question that claims to be answered at this point, based on what we are watching today, or right now, is were the Army Corps correct in doing everything they did for the last couple hundred years on the lower Mississippi? The answer is, well, it depends on who you talk to. But as you can see, some people, there's quite a number of people that argue that they should not have done it that way, maybe some other way. But the way hold by levee is not a very good solution anymore. It was at the beginning, 200 years ago. The Army Corps has been holding by levees the lower Mississippi for 200 years, since the War of 1812. I already told you that.
Ironically, while silt is suffocating the swamp, the lack of it is destroying the coastal marshlands to the east. The sediment which formed this region, and which should continue to enrich it, has been pushed out into the Gulf by the levee system along the Mississippi. It took the river 5,000 years to build this delta. It's taking mankind less than a century to destroy it. Last year, the coast lost 49 square miles of land. In the last 100 years, they lost 1 million acres of land. It's the story of a battle between man and nature. And it's the story of decisions made without an understanding of some of the long-term consequences. We now face these consequences. They're not long-term anymore.
So we can conclude, based on what Burt Lancaster said, the issue is time. What is a long time for us may not be long for nature. That we need to keep in mind. Okay, so now we're going to move on back to let me just cut this. I believe we're fine in there. Okay, the next item that we're going to be looking into is the chronology of the Mississippi River geomorphology. And in here we have a video, but I'm not going to show the video. I'm going to go on the vector for teaching purposes. So the channel changes in the Mississippi near the old river control structure. We already know what that is. From the year 1000 AD to 2000 AD. For the last 1,000, actually 1,000 years. Featuring the video Goodbye Louisiana, which is the one we just saw. This is 47 minutes, the full video, and then there's the abridged, the 9 minutes. So let's take a look at what it says in here. The Red River coming from Arkansas into the Gulf, moving south, in the Mississippi River coming from Minnesota. Mississippi River, obviously a larger river than the Red River, covering a lot more area. The Red River, I believe its origin should be around Arkansas somewhere. Red River and the Mississippi River were parallel rivers, each flowing south to the Gulf of Mexico 1,000 years ago. In the 15th century, westwardly meander belt of the Mississippi intercepts the Red. This is a meander belt, and it moves westwardly, and it intercepts the Red River. The upper Red becomes a tributary over here. The arrow shows the direction of the flow. The lower Red becomes a distributary, named the Atchafalaya. At that point, it was given a name, Atchafalaya. So that's a distributary. So the Mississippi comes over here. It gets more water from the Red River, and some of that water goes into the Atchafalaya. Basically, the Mississippi has messed up or interrupted the normal flow of the Red River to the Gulf. 1831, Shreve cuts off Turnbull's Bend. This was called Turnbull's Bend. And Shreve comes in here and this was already shown in the movie. He says, well, I don't want to turn around here. It's better if I take my boat over here. So they made a cut. He directed somebody out there, people over there, they made the cut for their own purposes. They, of course, didn't know at the time. They were not river engineers. All it takes is to convince a politician to do it, and so he went ahead and did it. And now we know, of course, that that should not be done. Any change that you do to a meandering river will cause a reaction from the river. The river is alive. So the river is gonna say, oh well, if they did this to me, I'm gonna do this to them. And it's always worked that way. When I was at school at Colorado back in the 70s, my professor, Daryl Simons, advised against doing any cuts. He says, no, that's not going to work. It's very counterproductive. Prior to that, he was saying that, or he said that, in the 20s and 30s, it was done, normally done. Cuts, meandering cuts in rivers. 1950, the upper Old River Channel was abandoned. Lower Old River links the three rivers. Abandoned? Who said that it was going to be abandoned? That depends on the gradients and the sediment transport. It just so happened that there were two connections and one of them was abandoned. That was like, which one? One of them was abandoned. The Mississippi liked to flow over here instead of over here, and it abandoned this upper Old River. The lower Old River now links the three rivers. A log jam in the Atchafalaya is removed. There was a log jam over here, which is shown in the movie. 1950, it was removed. The Atchafalaya becomes deeper and wider because now it's carrying water from the Mississippi. Prior, when they had the log jam in there, it was like it was closed. The river was closed, so it was not moving. It was very slow and quiescent. But now that they removed the log jam, then the river took a life of its own. Why did they remove the log jam? People out there wanted to navigate the Atchafalaya. They wanted more water in the Atchafalaya. The only way to get it is to remove the log jam. And so they did. So now the Atchafalaya took an interest in drawing more water from the Mississippi, because the Mississippi is the river that has a lot of water. The river doesn't have a whole lot of water. Right there. 1963, New Orleans District completes construction of overbank structure and low sill. So the overbank is over here, and this is the low sill, which subsequently is called the Old River Control Structure. This is the Old River ORCS in the Outflow Channel. They actually built an outflow channel in here. This is a new channel because this outflow channel is north of the upper Old River, which is over here. They also built the lock and they shut the closure in here, and they built a lock so that boats could go through in here. Ships and boats could go through in two directions, by the way. And finally, as it is now, more or less in the year 2010, auxiliary structure completed in 1986. This is the auxiliary structure. Hydropower plant completed in 1990. Hydropower plant over here. They made this channel over here, excuse me. Interestingly, I was there in 1980, it would have been 83 or 84, because I had an ASCE committee meeting over in New Orleans. And so the entire committee group, there was 5 of us, decided to go visit the new Old River Control Structure under construction at that time. So I saw it. Unfortunately, though, at that time, Professor Ponce was not as rich as he is right now, and just kidding you. And I didn't have a good camera, so my pictures starting in before 1986 are not very good. After that, I bought a big, camera, and I was able to take the pictures that you have seen in my website. Okay, so that's it. So the chronology is over here. You can review it on your own. I already pretty much talked about it. Everything that is in here, I had already said. Okay, and so now what I would like to do is I'm gonna go back in here. Where am I going? In here? I think so. Yeah, it's just for the heck of it. I am going to go over here and show you the video. The video is a cool video. 1000 AD. The Red River runs parallel to the Mississippi River as it heads itself in a general southern direction toward the Gulf of Mexico. 1400 AD. The Mississippi River moves westward with a meander belt, intercepting the Red River and creating Turnbull's Bend. The Red River becomes a tributary of the Mississippi River, and the lower reach, later named the Atchafalaya, becomes a distributary of the Mississippi. 1831. Henry Shreve accomplishes the cutoff of the Mississippi River, effectively converting the land comprised within Turnbull's Bend into Turnbull's Island. 1950. The upper Old River gradually dries out and becomes a remnant channel. The lower Old River now provides the west-east link between the Red Atchafalaya to the west and the Mississippi to the east. The flow switches direction seasonally. 1951. The large log jam at the entrance to the Atchafalaya is removed. The resulting effect is the widening and deepening of the Atchafalaya River channel, increasingly drawing flow from the Mississippi River. 1963. The navigation channel, lock and dam, and old river closure are completed. 1964. The low sill structure and the adjacent overbank flow structure are completed. The low sill structure is named Old River Control Structure, ORCS. 1986. The auxiliary Old River Control Structure is completed, AORCS. This structure is designed to provide additional security for flow control. Basically, after 73, remember the Casman experience on top of the ORCS prompted the Army Corps to do something about it, and they wanted to get more security or safety. So they decided to build the new Old River Control Structure. In other words, it's additional security for them to control the river if it would come with a huge flood. They figured that it was better that they have two gates so they can control better the river. So that's how they did that. I believe that structure was $300 million of the time. Now it will be 600. The power plant is completed in a dugout channel located near the ORCS. Okay, what happened here? Okay, yeah. Oh, let me see this. Okay. So the next subject that we are going to be I'm going to be showing you. So now we're moving from the state of Mississippi west. We're moving west because now we're going to be discussing the issues of the Salton Sea, the geomorphology of the Salton Sea, the sediment transport, etc. Fascinating subject. I spent a lot of time over the last 20 years looking at this problem. We have a lot of production in this area. So I'm going to show you a video of the cutback in the New River near Calexico. (1905 to 1907), a series of unfortunate events. We're going to be talking about this in detail, hopefully today. So let's hurry up. was it called New River? You must have heard they say the New River is the most polluted river in the U.S. Where's the New River? It goes by Calexico. It comes from Mexicali, Mexico. Why is it called New River? Because it was new. It did not exist prior to 1907. It was created by what we're going to see right now. There's no river over here. I believe, let me move this out, can I? Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm not sure. I think this is Mexico over here. So the New River is coming from Mexico in here and then all the way to Salton Sea.
At the height of the flood,
If you want to see the New River, all you have to do is go to El Centro. And about 3 or 4 miles before you get to El Centro, you cross the New River.
the Colorado River discharged through the crevice more than 75,000 cubic feet per second, while the Salton Sea, into which this immense volume of water was poured, rose at the rate of 7 inches per day over an area of 400 square miles. The most dangerous and alarming feature of the situation was the cutting back of the torrents as they rushed down the delta slope toward the Salton Sea.
George Kennan. I have dug out the George Kennan book, and I have it as reading material for you. I'm going to request that you read the entire book. I'm only going to discuss maybe 20-30% because obviously we don't have the time to read with you the entire book. But that's part of the requirement of this class. It's an excellent book, in my opinion, on the subject of sedimentation engineering, which is what we're covering. That's the cataract that was formed as the New River was formed.
The fine silt of which the soil was composed washed out like sugar, and wherever there happened to be a strong current, the flow soon produced a rapid. The rapid then became a cascade. The cascade grew into a fall, and the fall finally developed into a roaring cataract, which cut back upstream at the rate of 4,000 feet per day, and leaving below it a deep gorge with almost perpendicular walls. Some of the gorges were 50 to 80 feet deep and more than 1,000 feet across. The effect of this flood, in a geological way, was of extraordinary interest and very spectacular. In 9 months, during 1905 and 1906, the runaway waters of the Colorado River had eroded from the New and Alamo River channels and carried down into the Salton Sea a volume almost 4 times as great as that of the entire Panama Canal. The combined length of the channels cut out was almost 43 miles, the average width being 1,000 feet and the depth 50 feet. To this total of 420 million cubic yards must be added about 10% for side canyons, surface erosion, etc. Very rarely, if ever, has it been possible to see a geological agent effect in a few months a change which usually requires centuries.
That's the siphon on the All-American Canal. The All-American Canal was built in 1942 in order to send the water from the Colorado River to this site, to southwestern California. But the New River was in the middle, so they had to build a siphon. Now, I don't know if this is the largest in the world, but I personally have not seen any siphon bigger than this one. I was there a couple of times during my travels and my work that I've done over in the region. I started working in the region in the year 2006 until 2017 or 18. So for 12 years, I worked in the region of Boulevard, Tierra del Sol, and El Centro. another video that I'm going to show you because it's also a kind of a nice video. It's Origin of the New River. It's kind of a little bit repetitive, but this one's is also very illustrative of what went on. It has different shots. That's why I double here. I like to show you both videos. That is the New River. Remember, this river was formed by the cataract, which flowed from the Colorado north instead of south. The Colorado usually flows south, but in this case, it turned around 180 degrees and went back to the United States and created this river. This could be or is, in fact, the largest sedimentation, erosion, and sedimentation event that was that happened during the life of this country 250 years ago. There was nothing that in our history that paralleled this event, which was largely, I would say, 50% anthropogenic, human-induced. If you're a bit confused here, don't worry about it because we are going to talk about this in an extensive manner. But just read, let's take a read of what this says. This is really, really fascinating. What happened was this. We wanted to build a diversion on the Colorado. So we looked at the data. You build a diversion on a river, you gotta figure out when can you build a diversion. So they looked at the data and they had 27 years of data, only 27 years of data, because California did not exist. There was no data collection 27 years prior to 1905. And in the 27 years of data, the data showed only one flood in the winter. In no winter of the 27 years had there been 2 winter floods. During the winter of 1905, however, we had more than 1 winter flood. In other words, they opened up, they were getting ready to do the work, and they waited for the winter flood, and the winter flood came. So they said, oh, cool, now we can go and do the work that we need to do here. They wanted to make an intake because they wanted the water to send it back. And they knew that by gravity, the water could be or could flow back to the United States because gravity was in the direction of the United States. But they were in Mexico. They were already in Mexico, well within Mexico, within, I would say, at least 5 miles inside Mexico. But it so happened that it was a matter of luck. Nature decided to send 2 and even 3 floods that particular year, 1905, 1906. And the issue is why? Well, I myself have studied El Nino, and we're discussing El Nino in the other class in 634, meteorological event on the Pacific. And we have every reason to believe that the 1905-1906 winter was an El Nino. So it was an unusual, weird behavior, meteorological behavior. So basically, I'm going to say that we didn't know at the time because El Nino was not known at the time, but I believe that in 1905-1906, El Nino hit us without us knowing, and it caused all the trouble that we are going to narrate from here on. Okay? So it caused a huge flood which could not be controlled. Yeah, some of this is repetition, so I'm going to skip it right there. This is a view of Imperial Valley. So that's the new river coming over here, the arrow, the blue arrow. The new river is right here, as you can see, and I've already shown it to you. The siphon over the new river, courtesy of Google Earth. I took this picture from Google Earth. Okay, next is a very important book. It's called The Salton Sea, an account of Harriman's fight with the Colorado River. Who is Harriman? Well, let's take a look. The book will tell. Kennan is the author of the book. This book is dated 1917. I'm not sure exactly why Kennan or what position was Kennan in that he could write this book. But the book is one of the most amazing and fascinating books that I have ever read on the subject of sedimentation engineering. Actually, it goes beyond sedimentation engineering. It goes into human nature, into politics. It's an excellent book, in my opinion. So I urge you to read it completely. I've read it 5 times at least. I almost know it by heart. So, The Salton Sea, an account of Harriman's fight. I am going to avoid the PDF time, so I think I'm already looking at. Can you see the heading of the book? It says an account of Harriman's fight.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Then we're fine. Okay, I'm going to go over this book as I always do, and I'm going to cover maybe 20, 30, 40%. Rather quickly, of course, and I'm not going to go into the rest of the stuff because I figure you should read it. And it's less important from the technical standpoint. It does get into the politics and what is it they had to do in order to accomplish what they wanted to accomplish. Basically, in summary, the book tells the story of what happened in Mexico, south of the border, about 5-10 miles south of the border. In 1905, the winter of 1905-1906, and how and who went about fixing it and making sure that Imperial Valley was not flooded. Because if they didn't fix it, they didn't do anything. If they ran from the problem, that was going to be the end of the Imperial Valley. Now, the Imperial Valley, how interesting. Well, the book tells about it. The Imperial Valley was at the time only 5 or 6 years old. It had been created at the turn of the century. And he had about, I believe, 12,000 people that came from all over the country, presumably from all over the world. So in 6 years, they had this population boom out there, agriculture, getting rich and so forth, which and fine they are. But they had a problem, the 1906 problem, that it was a hydrology problem, an engineering problem. It was a management problem also. What they wanted to do is they wanted to get the water to the site at whatever cost. And it ended up costing a whole lot, perhaps more than what they ever thought that it would cost. Okay, so that's the book by Kennan. The section says the Salton Sink, the creation of the oasis, the runaway river. I'm going to get to the runaway river, and I'll leave for you the saving of the valley and the recompense. Fascinating book. I love this book. It is right up our alley, sedimentation engineering. You can't distinguish when he's talking about sediment or when he's talking about something else. I went too fast. The Salton Sea. No series of events in the history of Southern California is more interesting or more dramatic than the creation of the beautiful and fertile oasis of the Imperial Valley in the arid desert basin of the Salton Sink. Yes, it's all there. I should tell you at this point, I was talking about people getting rich. And in fact, I think several years ago, I looked for the richest counties, meaning the counties in the U.S. with higher mean annual income. That was an interesting piece of data. find out where the rich people are. Not so much the very rich, but the mean means most of them are rich. Okay, that's what it said. But at any rate, I was surprised to find out that there were two counties in the U.S. that stood out. One of them was Washington, D.C. It's not a county, it's like a District of Columbia. And that's understood because a lot of people out there are working for the government. They have very good paychecks and so forth. And there's a lot of them out there. And the number two, you know what county was number two? Imperial County, right there in the Imperial Valley. Yes. Conclusion, there's a lot of rich people out there. A lot of the farms out there are maybe 2,000 acres. And they have about 200,000 acres, I believe. 2,000 acres. There's a lot of people out there, families, that have farmed for many years, since the turn of the century. They started farming in 1900s. Exactly. They've been farming for 122 years. Exactly. And families have succeeded, kids and so forth, and they continue to own it. However, there is a problem that has come up in the last few years. And the problem is they eventually will be replaced. We believe in a few decades, you're not going to have Imperial Valley anymore dedicated to agriculture. The agriculture will have to move somewhere else. Why? Because two other segments of society had come in and they're trying to claim the land for themselves. One of them is wind generation, wind power. There's a lot of wind out there. So the wind farms are popping up everywhere out there. I've seen 3 or 4 in my last visit. It's been a while now, 2 or 3 years. But they will eventually take over. Another kid on the block of the last 2-3 years is the issue that they discovered lithium. I was forgetting the name. Lithium. And lithium is the new gold. I don't need to tell you why. You can't live without your cell phone, right? Well, the cell phone works because of lithium. So if Imperial Valley can produce the lithium which the societies throughout the world need, then eventually lithium will replace agriculture. Of course, everybody knows we're not going to eat the lithium, but agriculture will go somewhere else for sure. So it will be 100, 150 years at the most, and then that's about it. But the story that we are telling right now goes back to 1905, 1906, at the beginning of the Imperial Valley. So what, I read this morning, so I'm very familiar with what I'm going to say today. It's a geomorphological situation which is very unusual. This is what's the word of it? It's a German word that means subsidence of the land. But this land over here has subsided. Subsided, what do you mean subsidence? Well, subsidence is the opposite of tectonism, uplift. Uplift is always coupled with subsidence because the volume needs to be conserved, mass needs to go somewhere. So if there's a mountain or a group of mountains that are going up, then there's some land in there that is going down. And that's exactly what happened over here. The depth of the the deepest point of the Salton Sea, I believe, is about 330 feet below sea level. If you travel to El Centro, before you get to El Centro, you get right on the side of the road, it's going to say mean sea level 0, or sea level elevation, or at mean. This point here is at mean sea level, because the slope goes from Mexico. It's higher in Mexico, then it goes down, crosses the border around El Centro, and then it keeps moving down. That is the reason why the Salton Sea was formed, because when the Colorado went out of control in Mexico, and it turned right, it turned 180 degrees. As a matter of fact, all it had to do was just move the slope of the channel, or the river, of the stream, coming down from Mexico was 3, 4, 5 times greater than the slope going further south into the Gulf. So what was the water going to do? Once it found the slope, it will go through that slope. We know, hydraulic engineers know, that if a river has a choice between 2 slopes, left or right, if the right slope is steeper, it'll go on the right slope, for sure. And that's exactly what happened here. So this is a combination of a lot of things, mostly geomorphological. The geomorphology was such that it lent itself to what was happening or what was going to happen. As recently as the year 1900, the Imperial Valley had not a single civilized inhabitant. It had not been cultivated. Now we know for a fact, and I've been telling you this all along, that if you have a desert and there's no water, nothing's going to happen. But if you keep you add water to the desert, immediately it'll pop up and grow all kinds of produce and fiber and so forth. That is something that nature has decided to put together, whether we like it or not. The fact of the matter, and this is also the basis of my 800 millimeter theory, isohyet theory, that in the arid areas, there's no water, but there's a lot of nutrients waiting for us to add the water. In the humid areas, very humid areas, there's a lot of water, but there's no nutrients. So you cannot really farm in the wet areas. You can't farm in the wet areas. And that may be one of the reasons why we cannot develop Northern California, simply put, because Northern California is too wet. There's a part out there in Northern California which rains about roughly 120 inches, I think. It's in millimeters, about 5,000 millimeters. That's a lot. That's 60% more than the Amazon, which already has a lot of water, you see? So that is why I say in our theory that at 800 millimeter isohyet, you have the best of both worlds. Enough water to survive and make a living, and enough nutrients to produce the food that you need. And the better food consist or contain the better nutrients. We know that for a fact. We can't see them, but we surmise from all the study that has been done. Believe me, there's an example, and not a very nice example, but it's an example nevertheless. Where are the pygmies? Pygmies? What do pygmies have to do with the course sedimentation? Well, the pygmies are in tropical Africa, west central Africa. There's a group of people, I believe there's about 600,000 according to Google, that live out there, and they're short. They're about maybe 3 foot high, 3 to 3.5 foot high. Well, there's been argued, I'm not sure of this 100%, but I'm going to share it with you no matter what. It doesn't matter. There's been argued that because the rainforest lacks nutrients, they also lack potassium, which is a fundamental nutrient for life and for good well-being. So lacking potassium, this issue must have led to, over the course of millennia, the formation of these people, which are, of course, people, Homo sapiens and so forth, but they're a lot shorter than the normal size. If you wanted more information about this, just Google it and find out for yourself, because I read this in Google. Look for pygmies and you'll see it. Okay, so the Colorado River carries a lot of silt. Really? Colorado, what does Colorado mean? Colorado means brown, red in Spanish. Why in Spanish? Because the Spanish were here 300-400 years ago. The first Spanish that arrived in the area, I believe it's been quoted, is about 1640. 1640, 1650. So they're very early in colonization, I guess you could say. The Spanish coming from Mexico were out here in the area. So the river was the Colorado River, named by the Spanish in the 17th century, just 400 years ago. In 1849, it became the United States. It became part of the United States when Mexico ceded a large portion of its territory, California, parts of Oregon, Arizona, to the United States. Okay, here we go. The ancient Gulf of California. Here. This is the Gulf of California. And this is the Colorado River. So we have to go back here, I don't know, 100 million years? At least 100 million years. Okay, 100 million years that geologists like to talk about it as if it were nothing. We have a tendency to believe, oh, don't kid me, 100 million years, how do you know? But in point of fact, there's geologic evidence that shows that those numbers are correct. Okay, so the Colorado River, maybe 5 million years. Over the course of 5 million years, it carved its channel. 3 to 5 million years, I would say. You can look it up also. Okay, so the Colorado River comes in here. It joins with the Gila River that is coming from the mountains of Arizona next to Yuma, and then it deposits over here. And over the course of at least 1 million, if not 2 million years, it has created this delta bar. And the delta bar is a barrier between this area and this area. In other words, this area used to be zero level, 0, 0, 0, and over here it started coming down. Let's talk in feet or meter, it doesn't matter. So 0 mean sea level over here a little higher, maybe 15. You talk on meters, meters is okay. Say 15 meters over here. No, not even 15, maybe 10 meters. So then it goes to 0 over here, 0, and it goes down to about 100, minus 100 meters over in the depth of the depression, which is around here somewhere. Okay. So what happened was that over the course of at least 1 million years, if not 2 million, the Colorado deposited its silt, and it deposited over here in the delta. There's a delta bar over here. And over, like I said, over the course of time, the height of the crest of this delta, it is currently at 13 meters above sea level. 13 meters. That has been documented. You could go out there with Google Earth and start moving the little locator for the altitude and find out where the 13 meters are. We have done that. It's around here somewhere at a place called Hardy, of all places. It's an American name. Hardy River or Hardy something in Mexico. Okay. So then what happened in here is that the Colorado is going to continue to create its delta, only that it will need time, and we don't have time. People live 80 years, at most 80 years, roughly, and 80 years is nothing compared to 1 million years, right? So it continues to create its delta, it continues to dump sediment, and the issue is, where's the delta what's gonna happen to this delta? And the answer is, it'll grow. Sometimes it will move right, sometimes it will move left, because it has to spill and spread the sediment around, normally, by gravity, right? So every 500 years, it has been recorded or documented that the Colorado would move right, flood this area, which is under elevation, under zero elevation, and then overflow out of the delta bar and go back to the Gulf, where it should go. So that happened every 500 years. So we can count that 500 years ago it did happen. As a matter of fact, this lake has a name. I believe it's called Lake Coahuila, something like this. Anyway, so go back in here. So it must be that the geomorphological situation here is not that it doesn't favor the move to the right, but rather the move to the left, because every 500 years, now I can't tell you because 500 years to me seems a whole lot of time, but for nature it's nothing. But that's a fact. Hardy, right. Outlet through what is known Hardy's Colorado, which is a branch of the Colorado. How many times since the tertiary epoch, that's a lot of time, 1 million years, has been alternately emptied and refilled? We have no means of knowing. So that's why they're telling, he's telling what I just said. Okay. Let's move in here a little bit. She's talking about the history of this site, and it's a very good history, by the way, very good book. Okay, now she's going to start talking about how is it that people that populated this region at the late 1800s and early 1900s developed the idea of developing the valley. The valley used to be called the Colorado Desert, but at the turn of the century, last century, 122 years ago, the local people decided that it was not a very good name, Colorado Desert, because it gave the impression that there was a desert, which in fact it was. So they changed it to Imperial Valley. Why did they choose the name Imperial Valley? I don't know. But it's been Imperial Valley ever since, 122 years. Okay, 1891, the beginning of California. Over here we have a good relief map of Imperial Valley and its environs, put together by the Reclamation Service. That's interesting. The Imperial Valley was formed in the year 1900. The Reclamation Service was formed in the year 1905. I believe it was Teddy Roosevelt that instituted the Reclamation Service, which later became the Bureau of Reclamation, the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, meaning their job was to reclaim Western lands for agriculture. That's why it's called reclamation. And up to this date, it has kept a name, by the way. I believe when President Carter, this is an interesting story of politics. When President Carter came into office in 1978, he asked the question, he and his team reviewed all the agencies to see what they could do about fixing them or whatever. And Carter was an engineer, he was a nuclear engineer, and he realized that the Bureau of Reclamation was no longer doing reclamation. They were really doing power, water power. But the reclamation was all but gone at the time. This is 1978 when Carter came into power. So then he decided, I'm sure he consulted with his staff and everything, he decided to change the name. And the Bureau of Reclamation became the U.S. Bureau of Power, something like that, Power Service, I think. It was not a very fancy name. People didn't like it. I personally didn't like it. I thought that the name of the Bureau had been compromised. I've always, when I was a student back in the 60s and 70s, we held in very high esteem the work of the Bureau because they have done most of the hydraulics that was done in the Western United States from 1905 to the end of the 1900s. But the president is the president. He changed the name. 2 years later, interestingly, Reagan went in. And Reagan was not an engineer. Reagan was an actor, a movie actor. And he and his advisors decided that the Bureau had been wronged by the change of names and they returned it back. Can you believe that? So for 2 years, the Bureau was not there. And then in 1980, when Reagan moved in to office, they changed it. Now we have the Bureau of Reclamation forever. They're not going to attempt to change the name again, even though they hardly reclaim anything at this point. That's an interesting story. It reminded me because this is a picture that was put together by the Bureau. Okay, Kennan is talking here about the protagonists of what went on at about that time. So I'm going to skip this because I really want to get into the hydraulics. I want to cover the hydraulics in here with you. Okay, this is the picture that we already seen. Interestingly, there's a Laguna Salada over here in Mexico, which I actually visited a couple of times already out there. It has no water. It has no water. It's a dry lake, salt lake. Why is it called Salton Sea? Because it's salty. Why is it salty? Because it's endorheic. We already covered that ground before. Perhaps not in this class, but in some other classes. Okay. So the good thing about this book is that it gets into everything. He's a generalist. He doesn't mind talking about sedimentation. The next paragraph he's talking about hydrology, and the next one he's talking about politics, and the fourth one he's talking about human strength and so forth. So it's very good. It's general. That's the way it should be, by the way. So this is part of the Colorado River watershed. Those of you that have visited the Colorado, and I know you have, I was there about 5 years ago. Yeah, 5 years ago, 2018. We did a video. We wanted to go out there and do a video. We have an excellent video on the Colorado, by the way. I learned that the Colorado is deepening its channel. I believe if the number is correct, if my memory serves me right, it's coming down or it's degrading at about 0.6 feet per year, I believe. That's a lot, 0.6 feet per year. But don't get me on this number. It has been quoted. It is quoted in the movie that I'm going to share with you later on. The movie that we did in the year 2018 on the Colorado River Canyon. The Runaway River. here he's talking about the event of the year 1905. 1905 and 1906. Okay, here we go, the first map. This is California, this is Mexico. Okay, Yuma is over here. It's not marked, but it's over there. I think there's Yuma, California, and right across the border, Yuma, California would be here. And then Yuma, Arizona would be here, right there where the arrow is. And as you can see, interestingly, in here the problem is international, binational. We were doing all this work in Mexico, in this part of the world, of the map, which is Mexico. Arizona is over here. If we had been doing the work on the right side, on the eastern side of the river, we would be in Arizona. That's the US. But no, we were doing it in Mexico. For whatever reason, that's just the limit between Mexico and the United States. So this is the Colorado River, okay? And in here, we try to do an opening so that we can get some of the water from the Colorado. Why? Because we wanted to send that water back to irrigate the Imperial Valley. Would it go back without pumping? And the answer is yes, because here it's at about, elevation is about 10, right? Remember I said that? And then over here, it goes up to 13 and then it comes down. And it comes down to 0 and then it goes to minus 100 meters. So from here on, going north, it is very steep. Not steep, but it does have a gradient. And the gradient is about 5 to 10 times greater the gradient, the opposite gradient, the gradient going south. So Kennan describes in much detail all the decisions that were being done at the time. And I want you to read this because I want you to know that these things actually do happen in the real world. There's a lot of technical issues, but also a lot of politics. One of the things he says, which is fascinating, is that, and I don't know where it is, but I'm going to quote it off the bat here, that in the process of solving this problem, once they were in the problem, they consulted the best minds in sedimentation engineers, hydraulic engineers in the United States, and they all came over and gave opinions. And Kennan says their all opinions were all contradictory. And I don't know exactly where it is, but you're going to read it and you're going to find out. The opinions of the experts were contradictory. So they really didn't know what to do. Eventually, they solved the problem by sheer will and force, strength of mind, I guess you could say. They said, the boss, which was Harriman, said, I solved the problem in Utah and it was fine. It was a difficult problem. We solved it. So now we're going to come in here and solve this problem no matter what. Interesting story about this, though, which gets into the political arena, is that he was running broke or spending a lot of money, and then he decided to ask for help from the federal government. He asked twice in the year 1905, and he was declined by Roosevelt, I believe. Roosevelt said, I'm sorry, that's your problem from the beginning. I guess Roosevelt was advised that that was a California problem, and he didn't have to put in the help of the federal government. So at the end, it went back and forth between Harriman asking for help and Roosevelt declining the help 2 or 3 times, back and forth, and then Harriman decided to do it on his own. And he did it. And he did it. That's all in the book. It's all in the book. How did Harriman become involved? He was head of the Southern Pacific Railroad, because the railroad had a line there across the California, across the Imperial Valley, and they felt that they had to stake the line, the railroad, and so forth. And eventually, the original developer, which was called the California Development Company, was going bust because of the problems that they were having with the sediment. The problems are mostly with the sediment, interestingly. So they appealed to the railroad, which had a lot of money. So they went in and they basically had a stake because they had loaned money. Like the collateral for the money that they loaned these other people, the developers, was the actual land and so forth. So they went in there, and sooner or later they found out themselves totally involved with it. More so because they realized that if anybody had the wherewithal to solve the problem, it was them. It was the railroad. It was not the California Development Company, which was almost at the verge of bankruptcy. Another map in here, lower intake at time of Southern Pacific loan, right? They loaned. This is the channel that actually breached and broke, and then the water went out of control. They loaned him $200,000. Can you believe that? $200,000 of the year 2005. At that time, there was a heck of a lot of money. Okay, Chief Engineer Rockwood was in charge, but then eventually he was put aside, and Corey went in there because Corey was an engineer hired by the railroad. Rockwood had been hired by the development company, so eventually they probably had a problem in there, and Corey replaced Rockwood as the engineer of record at the time. Okay, I don't know exactly where the hydrology part is, and this is a very long book, it's about 100 pages, but I already told you the story. What happened was that they were unlucky because they thought that it was going to go, that the river was going to do 1 flood per winter, and it did 3 floods. They were not expecting the second one, and not expecting not only the second one, but the big one, the third one was very big. It was in November of the year 2005, I believe, and that breached and broke the thing, and the water was out of control, going into the Salton Sea, creating the Salton Sea at the time. The Salton Sea was empty, and it started to fill in the year 2005 with the breach that was out of control, and then eventually it took them 2 years, interestingly, 2 years to fix it. How did they fix it? They dumped a whole bunch of rock on the site, a whole bunch. I don't know, over there it does say what volume of rock that they dump, but they dump a whole bunch of rock. It says in this book that they brought rock from quarries with a radius of 400 miles from the site. 400 miles, Mexico and the United States. A lot of money. A lot of money at that time, of course. It was in the millions of dollars, maybe $2-3 million of that time. But they did fix it. They did stop it. So anyway, so let me finish in here. I'm going to, okay, here we go. Lower intake in spring of 1906, showing the site Rockwood Headgate in first 3 attempts to close the break. First attempt. They had about 5 attempts and they failed. And finally they did it. And they did it by sheer force of volume of rock to Salton Sea. They were going to get help from San Francisco, but they couldn't because San Francisco had undergone an earthquake. How unlucky. And the San Franciscans weren't worrying about with their own earthquake. See, April 1906, San Francisco was partially destroyed by earthquake and fire. So they couldn't help too much. They had problems of their own. But as the story is the author goes on, and these are pictures that I've taken from here, and I put them in my videos. Hind and Clark. These were the engineers, Hind and Clark. As a matter of fact, I'm going to tell you an interesting story. They actually dumped so much rock in there that they named that dam, that barrier, Hind Clark, I believe. And it has been my objective over the last 10 years or so to go out there and examine the site and take pictures of it because I think it would be interesting. This, of course, is deep in Mexico, maybe 10 miles into Mexico. But you know what? This is not in Tijuana. This is over south of Mexicali. So it's a little bit more difficult to get out there. So to be honest, I haven't done that yet. Hopefully now that I'm retired, maybe I will go out there. I need to get some people from there that know what they're doing because I'm not going to go out there on my own. I would get lost. But the point is to go out there and examine the site where this thing happened in the year 1905, 1906. Where they dumped all that rock in order to stop the Colorado. And they did stop the Colorado from turning around and continuing to flood. They would have flooded everything. They would have flooded Mexicali. You cannot believe it. You cannot believe the amount of damage that if they had not done. I don't know what happened here. Are we at the end of this? Maybe we are. No, we're not. It's just something. Oh, there it is. There it is. There's just a problem, a little problem here. So, I hope you like this book. I can't tell you how important this book is for us to understand the issues of sediment, which is what we are covering in this class. We may never have a problem like this again happen in the United States, but it is good to learn from what actually went on out there to see what solutions and so forth. We got in here another map in here, situation in June 1906. The whole river going into the Salton Sea. Yeah, it was in 1907 that they actually fixed it. It took them 2 years to fix it. Between here and there, solutions from some people and solutions from other people. But finally, Harriman decided that it was a matter of brute force, and he hired a whole bunch of people. There were 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people here working on this problem at one time. And they did it. Another one. First closure of the crevice, November 4, 1906. And of course, not having been there myself, and for you, it's kind of a bit confusing what exactly is it that we're doing. And Kennan does a good job, but I'm not sure. I don't think he's an engineer, so it would be a little lacking and to understand. I mean, difficult to understand completely what exactly went on. And I don't think that can be done in a book. It's a complete story for many volumes, as a matter of fact. But at the end, we get to this section where Harriman was communicating with Roosevelt, and I'm not going to go in there. You can read it on your own. But there were letters back and forth, dated December 19, 1906, right? And finally, Roosevelt told Harriman, "You're on your own. We're not going to help you." I don't know exactly why, but I think there's politics in there. Washington politics, you know. I've been to Washington a few times, of course. Everybody has. But I'm not privy to the politics that goes inside Washington. I'm not a politician, for one thing. So there's a lot of things out there. It's me and it's you. You know, politics is the art of deciding what's yours and what's mine. And in this case, the federal government decided not to support Southern California with resources. The only thing the federal government said was, "We'll give you the engineers from the Bureau of Reclamation to help you." And sure, they did. And they may as well help a lot. But there was no money in the issue. There was just all people, engineers that were already qualified to do this kind of work. Presumably, because I'm not going to say that all the engineers in the Bureau are good. I mean, most of them are good, but not everybody is, of course. It does vary. So the Bureau has a lot of engineers. I'm guessing that it's between 5,000 and 10,000. You can Google that, figure out how many engineers. And this is the famous Hinn-Clark Dam. Hinn and Clark were the engineers that actually put together this. This is the site where I want to visit. I want to find out exactly where it is and has it survived the passage of time, because it's 1907, end of 1906. January 1907 was when this thing was completed, and the breach was covered, meaning controlled, was under control by 1907. So that's what I am going to say at this point on this. So I will leave it to you for reading. And I did say at the time, and I'm going to repeat it, one question out of the exam will be coming out of this book. So now I'm going to cut it out from here and hopefully go back. Let's see, where am I going now? Our next subject is time engineering, the singular case on the south of the Salton Basin. I wrote this paper in the year 2015. It's an illuminating paper. It all started in the year 2008 when I visited Colombia. I visited my friend in Colombia, Carlos, who has a company and fixes meanders. Sows down meanders to the ground. That's the way he does it. Exactly, that's the way he does it. And I think I already told you, he's got 20 projects, out of which one failed. And when I was there visiting his projects back in the year 2008, it was in the field. It was in the Meta River. He was working on the Meta River, one of the tributaries of Colombia's got a lot of rivers out there in the eastern part of Colombia. It's kind of very humid. And I was standing in the field and I said, Carlos, I think you are a good time engineer. And he said, what do you mean? I said, well, you're dealing with time. It is a matter of time before your projects fail. I said that because he's a good friend of mine. I knew he wasn't going to get mad. And he wasn't. We have a friend. Our friendship with Carlos goes back to 1973 when I signed up, almost 50 years, when I signed up at Colorado State, and Professor Simons assigned me to this grad student office, and I went in there, and the first thing I saw there was Carlos, who was a grad student at the time. So we had an acquaintance or a friendship for almost 50 years. So I said, you're a good time engineer. And he took it in stride. He said, oh, yeah, right. You understand? I understand what you're saying. Hopefully it's not going to happen during my lifetime, but it did. Professor Ponce knows what he's talking. A few years later, maybe in the year 2015 or 17, so 10 years after this encounter had occurred in the field, one of his projects did fail. And there's only one, by the way, which is good. 1 out of 18, that's not too bad. And I am sure, I'm not privy to all the details, but I'm sure the people that hired him understood. He's the only one that does this sort of work. Nobody else does this sort of work. That's why he is well-to-do. He's hired all the time to do this sort of thing. He's pinning down the meanders, basically. I could have told him from the beginning that in the long term, it's not going to work. But who cares? Long term could be 100 years. We know that. It takes time for the things to react. If it happens while we're alive and kicking and we're responsible, well, so be it. That's just the way it's going to be. We designed the dam over in La Calzada over in northern Peru, and we gave it 10,000 years of return period. Then I figured 10,000 years, if I'm very, very unlucky, the flood will come tomorrow. And if I'm okay, then it will be 100 years at least, if not 200 or 300 or 10,000. That's 400 generations. That's extremely too long, as you know very well. So it's all a risk. It's all a risk. We're always at risk. That's engineering. We have to calculate, evaluate, and propose that something be done in order to control or manage the risk. So next time we come here next Tuesday, I am going to be getting into C12, time engineering. We'll spend a good portion of that lecture on that, and then move on to 13 and 14 and probably 15. We're on track. We're on track. Oh yeah, we have 29 references for this section. Thank you. I will see you next time, next Tuesday at the same time, 17:30.